Well, hey, I'm Jeff Baumgartner with Light Reading. I'm pleased to be joined here by Shirley Bloomfield. Good to see you here in the Dallas area at Network X.
It's great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Sure thing. So there's a lot going on right now in the rural market, right? So we've got BEAD on the horizon, so I'm assuming that that's one of your priorities. So what are the top priorities? I mean, we're almost halfway through the year, but is BEAD at the top, and kind of what are the top 2 or 3 right now?
So I know everybody gets really excited about BEAD because it's a historic amount of capital coming into the rural broadband space. But I will actually share that 2 things I think are actually even higher on that list.
Okay.
First of all, there's a lot of activity right now on the universal service front. So we talk a lot about building broadband networks, but what we need to focus on is how do you sustain and make those networks affordable, and universal service has been very key. A lot of different efforts going on right now, whether it's a court or whether it's on Capitol Hill, to ensure that that mechanism stays in place. So I would say that's job number 1 for rural broadband providers. Job number 2 has been the Reconnect program over at USDA. So while everybody's so excited about BEAD, USDA has been with this lending program as a pilot project for the last 3 or 4 years and has been putting out billions of dollars into rural America broadband network infrastructure. My folks have been utilizing that program to a great extent. So that is already ongoing, and we're looking to get that program formally authorized in the Farm Bill. So BEAD, I'd almost put as number 3.
Okay.
And part of it with BEAD is making sure BEAD can work. BEAD still got some interesting potential hiccups that we need to make sure that we work our way through.
Yeah, what do you see as some of the biggest potential hiccups for BEAD? Because I mean, it's a huge program. I mean, we kind of hear some of the way it's going to be implemented. There's some variance, state to state. Some are maybe more attractive than others. But
some are a little bit further ahead than others.
Yeah, it's kind of fragmented in that regard.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things from a small broadband provider perspective. And again, in our discussions with Secretary Raimondo and her team, they really see our players. I've got 850 companies across the country serving the most sparse parts of the population. They are primed to be the recipients of this funding because, let's be honest, the areas that are unserved or underserved are the hardest to serve. There's a reason they're not served right now. My guys know how to do that. But one, you've got to coordinate. So you've got the federal giving dictates to the states have their own plans. How that stays coordinated is going to be a challenge. Second of all, the areas that they are looking to potentially bid off in these states are really large market areas. Well, that doesn't traditionally work for my companies. They may want an area adjacent to their service territory or an area that makes sense. So it's getting the size right. Second, opportunity to have a low-cost option. BEAD actually requires you to do a low-cost option. That made a ton of sense when we had ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, but it has just run out of money. Without that ability to offer a low-cost option, that's going to be a challenge. Third is matching funds. The matching funds are weighted. It means that large carriers are going to have the opportunity to kind of buy their way in a little bit easier than a small company will. So that's going to be another. And I would say ground zero on all of this is mapping. We got to get the maps right. We've got to really show where there's connectivity, where there isn't, what are the speeds, what does it look like. So I would say that before any of that money really starts to flow, let's make sure that we know where the underserved folks in this country are.
Yeah, and what do you think of the status of the mapping question? Because I know the FCC did revise maps, and it's supposed to have an improved view on underserved, unserved. As you kind of review that, does it sync up properly, or are there still some variances or some gaps that need to be filled?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I will say, first of all, mapping, you'll never get it right? Because the minute you put out a map, somebody has already built or somebody has left a market. So
yeah, it's ever moving.
Absolutely. So you've got to recognize that. I think the issue right now is the challenge process and the fact that you've got to do each challenge on an individual basis. Well, if my companies look and they say, somebody's overstating their coverage into this area that I'm actually interested in serving, if I'm a small company company, I've got to challenge one after one after one, as opposed to the ability to kind of aggregate the challenges. That makes it administratively really burdensome. And what I fear is that companies will walk away and say, it's not correct, and I just don't have the time and energy to deal with it. So there's definitely work to be done with the mapping. I will say the FCC has been great. We have probably daily conversations with them.
Okay.
And what we are sharing are stories from the field about how the mapping isn't working, how the challenge process isn't working, so that maybe we can work collectively to improve the process.
Okay. And you had talked a little bit about the low cost option, right? So there is that piece that's required in BEAD, and then you mentioned ACP running out of funds, and there's still an open question. I mean, it seems like it's likely that it's going to run out before they can resolve something or fix it. Maybe they can do it further down the line. But in preparation for that, so what kind of role does your organization have on the ACP side and helping your members navigate what's coming up here?
So ACP was such an important part of this program, right? It was the idea to say, first of all, we're going to build broadband to all Americans. Great initiative, really important initiative, but not all Americans can afford that access. You can't even look for a job if you don't have broadband access. So there's a lot of vicious cycles that go on. So we are very supportive of the program, really worked with our member companies to work with their customers to sign folks up. I had companies sending vans out to tribal reservations, taking the sign up for ACP to the people in the community who had affordability issues, going to the school, figuring out who's on the low-cost lunch option or the free lunch programs. The problem is you had customers on this program for 10 months, a year, and now my companies are having to send out notices saying, oops, sorry, the money is running out. It's a government-funded program, but you know who customers blame? They blame the provider.
That's true. They're not going to go to the government and say, hey, what gives? Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's Congress. And honestly, you know what is really sad? The saddest thing to me is how this has gotten tied up in politics. You look at, the FCC put out a list of all the congressional districts in the country. How many customers in each of those districts get ACP? The House House Speaker has 30,000 customers in his district that receive ACP funding. But we can't get over the who gets credit if we extend it. So I will tell you, until the election is over, the money will run out, customers will be dropped off the network. The big question will be whether ISPs will want to re-engage if there is additional funding, because this is a lot of work. You're signing people up, you're getting them on the network, then you're telling them, oops, the money's gone, you're dropping them off the network. You know, how do you keep that cycle going? So I think this is really disappointing.
Yeah, it feels like from what we've seen so far, as this funding deadline is about to hit, a lot of broadband service operators are trying to develop alternatives, but it doesn't seem to. It's never like a one for one. It's kind of like, well, here's a different low cost option or some variation on that theme. So I know they're developing it, but do you have a role in helping them think that through? Going, well, if it does go away and seems likely, you need to come up with some sort of option to give these.
And it's tougher
customers.
If you're a little company. So let's say you've got 10 million customers, you can actually make your businesses subsidize, some of those low-cost options. You're one of my providers, you may have 10,000 consumers. You may have a couple grain feed elevators and maybe a local hospital. You don't have a lot to average that against. That's another reason why I think universal service is so important, because, for example, without universal service support that my member companies receive, their consumer bills would double. So if your broadband rate right now is $85 a month, your actual cost is probably well closer to $160 a month.
Okay.
Without that universal service support on a monthly basis, that to me is also an affordability program. So I think there's a lot of things we need to think about, because there's so much emphasis on let's build a network, let's get people on the network, but people have to be able to afford the network, and they have to be able to see what the value proposition is for the network.
Okay. Well, the last thing I was thinking about was the access technology, right, for a program like BEAD or another, sort of government subsidized program. There seems to be a lot of preference on fiber, and fiber can be very expensive, especially in rural areas. But from your perspective, do you take an agnostic view to the access technologies,
Nope.
like saying, like, hey, fixed wireless would work here, or a satellite or something, or it's $5,000 to reach somewhere. So how do you think through that, or what's your position on it?
I would be really honest with you. While I do think it does take every tool in the toolkit, we are absolutely fiber forward. We are fiber centric. It's amazing. My guys serve 35% of the landmass of this country. They are literally in the most remote parts of the country, 5% of the population. 82% of their customers have access to fiber to the home already, or fiber to the hog, as we call it. So, it is one of those things that we look at it and we say, you know what? It is future-proof technology. It is the ability to not go back in 3 years. When we watch how consumers are consuming broadband, even in rural markets, people have this assumption that people aren't using, smart ag and gaming. All of that stuff is incredibly robust. Telehealth in a rural community when you've lost your local hospital, really big stuff. So that need for the capacity is there. My members are seeing it, the customers are taking it. So I think there's a couple of things. First of all, it's cheaper in the long run to do fiber because you're not coming back in 3 years. You're not coming back in 5 years when there is going to be no more federal support to build these networks. The other thing for our guys is it's the OpEx. So much cheaper with fiber. We have what we call windshield time. If you're running services in rural New Mexico, you're driving 4 or 5 hours to a customer's home. The ability to manage the network and manage network issues with fiber from the central office cuts down all of that labor at a time when it's really tough to get broadband workforce anyway. So at the end of the day, while we say, there's going to be some cases that fixed wireless might be a temporary solution, do what you need to do. At the end of the day, we are absolutely promoting fiber, working with NTIA in the states to ensure that they have a fiber preference as they look at these projects.
Okay. Well, I think that's where we're going to leave it today here from Network X. So Shirley, thanks a lot for your time. It was great to catch up with you and cover some of the big issues that are on the front burner.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.